There are moments in television history that never make it into the highlight reels. Moments too quiet, too personal, too raw to be packaged into a clip show or a commemorative DVD. This is one of those moments. It happened on a Tuesday evening in March of 1980, backstage at NBC's Studio One in Burbank, California. The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was about to begin taping. The audience was settling into their seats. The band was running through the opening music. And Dean Martin, 52 years old, still one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment, was standing in the hallway outside his dressing room, mid-cigarette, telling a dirty joke to two stagehands who were laughing so hard they had to lean against the wall. That's when he saw the wheelchair. It came around the corner slowly, pushed by a young woman in a yellow Make-A-Wish Foundation volunteer jacket. And in that wheelchair sat a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old. His head was wrapped in a blue knit cap. His face was pale, almost translucent. His eyes were enormous, too big for his small face, and they were looking directly at Dean Martin with an expression that was part wonder, part fear, as if he wasn't sure this moment was really happening. Dean stopped mid-sentence. The cigarette hung from his lips, forgotten. The stagehands went quiet. The volunteer walked toward him carefully, apologetically, the way people do when they know they're interrupting something. She said, "Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry. I know you're about to go on. But this is Tommy. He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, stage 4. He's been in treatment for 11 months, and his doctors..." Her voice caught. She steadied herself. "His doctors say he doesn't have much time. His one wish was to meet you. Just to meet you. We tried to arrange it through your manager, but we couldn't get through, and then someone at NBC said you were taping tonight, and I know this is the worst possible timing, but I thought..." Dean raised his hand. Not unkindly. "Just stop." He dropped the cigarette onto the concrete floor and crushed it with the heel of his shoe. Then he walked over to the little boy and knelt down. Not crouched. Knelt. Both knees on the floor, so that he was looking up at Tommy, not down. "Hey, pal," Dean said softly. Tommy stared at him. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Dean smiled, that famous smile, but not the stage smile, not the Rat Pack smile. This was something else, something quieter. "You like music?" Dean asked. Tommy nodded. "What's your favorite song?" Tommy's voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "Everybody loves somebody." Dean's smile didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. He nodded slowly. "That's a good one. That's a real good one." He glanced up at the volunteer. "How much time do we have before I go on?" She checked her watch. "Maybe 10 minutes. Okay," Dean said. He looked back at Tommy. 10 minutes. You and me. Deal?" Tommy nodded again, and this time the faintest smile appeared on his face. What happened next wasn't captured by any camera. There was no film crew in that hallway, no photographer, just a few crew members who happened to be passing by and stopped when they realized what they were seeing. Dean Martin spent the next 11 minutes sitting on the floor next to Tommy's wheelchair. He asked him about his favorite TV shows, his favorite foods, his dog if he had one. Tommy did. A golden retriever named Biscuit. Dean told him about a dog he'd had as a kid in Steubenville, Ohio, a mutt named Footsie who used to howl whenever Dean practiced singing. Tommy laughed, a real laugh, small and fragile, but real. Then Dean started singing, quietly, just above a whisper. Everybody loves somebody sometime. Everybody falls in love somehow. He wasn't performing. He was just singing to a little boy who needed to hear it. Tommy closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wheelchair. His mother, who had been standing a few feet away, trying not to cry, pressed her hand over her mouth. When Dean finished the song, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver money clip. He slid out a $20 bill and pressed it into Tommy's small hand. "That's for Biscuit," he said. "You get him something nice, okay? A steak or something. Dogs love steak." Tommy looked down at the $20 bill like it was a treasure map. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a voice called out, "Dean, we need you in 5. Dean looked toward the voice, then back at Tommy. He stood up slowly, his knees cracking. He put one hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You're a tough kid, you know that? Tougher than me, tougher than most guys I know." He paused. "You keep fighting, okay? You keep fighting, and I'll keep singing. Deal?" Tommy nodded. His eyes were wet now, but he was smiling. Dean turned to the volunteer. What hospital is he at? Children's Hospital, Los Angeles, she said. Dean nodded. He didn't write it down. He just nodded. Then he looked at Tommy's mother. You take care of him, he said. It wasn't a request. It was something closer to a prayer. She nodded, unable to speak. And then Dean Martin walked down that hallway, through the backstage curtain and onto the brightly lit stage of The Tonight Show. Johnny Carson was already sitting at his desk, flipping through his note cards. The audience applauded as Dean walked out, waving, grinning, playing the part. But those who knew him, the crew members who'd worked with him for years, they noticed something different. His eyes were red. Not bloodshot, just red, like he'd been holding something back. He sat down in the guest chair. Johnny leaned forward with that familiar Johnny Carson grin and said, Dean Martin, ladies and gentlemen, good to see you, Dean. Good to be here, Johnny. You look great. You always look great. What's your secret? Dean smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Clean living, he said, and the audience laughed right on cue. Johnny launched into his questions. Dean gave his answers. They talked about Dean's upcoming tour. They talked about the Rat Pack. They talked about Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., all the old stories. Dean was professional, charming, funny, but he kept looking toward the side curtain, the place where Tommy's wheelchair had been parked so the little boy could watch the taping. Halfway through the interview, Johnny paused. He set down his note cards. Dean, he said quietly, you okay? The audience went silent. This wasn't part of the script. Dean looked at Johnny. For a moment, it seemed like he might say something, but then he just smiled and said, yeah, John, I'm okay. But he wasn't. When the taping ended and the audience filed out, Dean didn't go to his dressing room like he usually did. He didn't schmooze with the producers or share a drink with the band. He walked straight back to that hallway, but Tommy was already gone. The volunteer had taken him home. The hallway was empty. Dean stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where the wheelchair had been. Then he walked to the nearest phone, one of those old wall-mounted phones with the rotary dial, and he made a call. The NBC operator connected him to Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. He asked for the pediatric oncology wing. He told them his name. There was a pause. Then a nurse came on the line, and Dean said, I met a little boy tonight. His name is Tommy. He's got leukemia. I need to know what he needs. The nurse, confused, asked him to clarify. What does he need? Dean repeated, what does his family need? Medical bills? Treatments? Whatever it is, I want to know. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then the nurse said, Mr. Martin, are you serious? Yeah, Dean said. I'm serious. What happened over the next 3 days wasn't reported in any newspaper. It didn't make the trades. It wasn't mentioned on Entertainment Tonight. But the records exist, buried in hospital archives and family letters and the faded memories of nurses who were there. Dean Martin made phone calls, a lot of them. He called his manager. He called his accountant. He called doctors he knew in Los Angeles and Las Vegas and New York. He set up a fund to cover Tommy's medical expenses, all of them. Everything the insurance wouldn't pay for. The experimental treatments, the medications, the travel costs for the family. He didn't do it through a publicist. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't want credit. He just did it, and then he did something else. Every week, for the next 4 months, a package would arrive at Tommy's house. Sometimes it was a toy. Sometimes it was a book. Once it was a record player and a stack of Dean Martin albums. And every package came with a handwritten note. Short, simple. Things like, keep fighting, pal, Dean, or Biscuit says hello, your friend Dean. Tommy's mother kept every single note. She put them in a shoebox under her bed. Years later, she would tell a reporter he didn't have to do any of that. He met Tommy for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, but he treated him like he mattered, like his life mattered. Tommy lived for another 7 months, longer than the doctors expected. Long enough to see his 7th birthday. Long enough to go to Disneyland one more time. Long enough to tell his mother, on one of his last good days, I met Dean Martin, and he was really nice. When Tommy passed away in October of 1980, Dean Martin sent flowers to the funeral. White roses. The card said, he was tougher than all of us, Dean. Dean never spoke about it publicly. Not once. Not in interviews. Not in his autobiography. Not even to Johnny Carson, who only found out about the whole thing years later when Tommy's mother wrote him a letter thanking him for having Dean on the show that night. Johnny kept that letter in his desk drawer for the rest of his career. In 1995, a former Tonight Show crew member was interviewed for a television retrospective. The interviewer asked him what his most memorable moment was in 30 years of working on the show. He thought for a long time. Then he said, "There was this night back in 1980. Dean Martin was the guest, and before the show, he met this little kid with cancer. I watched him sit on the floor and sing to that kid like nothing else in the world mattered. And I remember thinking, that's who he really was, not the guy on stage, the guy on the floor." There's a reason we remember certain people long after they're gone. It's not because of the awards they won or the records they sold or the movies they made. It's because of the moments no one was supposed to see. The moments when the cameras were off and the audience was gone, and all that was left was a choice, to walk away or to kneel down. Dean Martin knelt down. He knelt down for a little boy in a wheelchair who didn't have much time left, and he gave him something more valuable than money or fame. He gave him 11 minutes of feeling like he mattered, like he wasn't just a sick kid, like he was someone worth sitting with, worth singing to, worth remembering. That's not magic. That's something better. That's grace. And grace, unlike fame, doesn't fade. It echoes in the lives it touches, in the families it holds together, in the quiet moments when someone chooses kindness over convenience. That Tuesday night in March of 1980, Dean Martin walked off the Tonight Show stage, picked up a phone, and made a choice that no one was supposed to know about. But Tommy knew. His mother knew. The nurses knew. And maybe that's all that mattered.